The domain of a function is defined as the largest set of numbers for which the value f of x is a real number. So what does this mean for us? What this is saying is that the domain is the set of x's, all of them, that would give me a real y. So something that is not a real y value would be like an imaginary number or division by zero, something that's undefined. So any of the numbers. So let's look at some example. Let's say we have f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. So if I want to know the domain of this, so if someone is asking me the domain of this, what they're asking for is what numbers, what x's can go in here and give me a real y value, a real f of x, real y or f of x, however you want to think of it. So in order to do that, what we need to do is think of the numbers that would give us an answer that is undefined or not real. So 1, something that is undefined. So there's only really one way for right now of getting something that's undefined, and that's division by 0, which gives us an undefined answer. So if we divide by 0, so any number that would make us get a 0, any x value that would make us get a 0 in the denominator would not be included in our domain because it would cause us to divide by 0, which would therefore be an undefined answer. And then the second one is when we square root or an even root, or take an even root. Of a negative number. Remember, we can't have the square root of a negative number because that would mean we would need two numbers to multiply together to equal -1, and that can't happen. At least not in the real number plane. There are such things as imaginary numbers, but they are not included in this function. So anything that would either give us division by 0 or a negative number under a radical, like this. Anytime we have a negative number under a radical, that would not be included in our domain. So let's do a couple examples. Let's say we have f of x is equal to x plus 1. We'll do something real simple. And if I were to ask what the domain of this was, I would be asking you, what x values can I put in here that will give me a real answer? And in this case, we can put any values in. We can put in -1, that will give us 0. We can put in -5, that will give us -4. We can put in -1,000,000, that would give us -999, etc., etc. So we can go in the positive direction. Put in 1,000,000, we get 101,000,000. And we put in any number. There's any number we put in there, it's going to give us a real answer. So the domain is everything. Everything towards negative infinity, everything to positive infinity. So we say that the domain is all real numbers. Or you can write it like this. It goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. So let's look at a different example where we're going to get something that is not all real numbers. So f of x is equal to, say, the square root of x. So here if we put in 1, we're going to get the square root of 1, which is 1. If we put in 4, we're going to get 2. If we put in 10, we're going to get the square root of 10, etc., etc. But if we go towards the negative scale, we're going to get, if we put in -1, we're going to get a negative number under the radical. If we put in -2, if we go anywhere negative, we're going to get a negative number under the radical. So we can't put in any negative numbers for this equation. They cannot be included in this equation because it will be an unreal answer. We can put in 0 here too. So we can start at 0 and then go to positive infinity, but we cannot include any negative numbers. So we would say that the domain of this is equal to be equal to 0 to infinity. And this bracket means that we include 0, because we can have 0 here. The square root of 0 is 0, but we cannot have anything smaller than 0. Cannot have negative 0.00001. So anything smaller than 0 is going to be in a negative number. So this is where it stops. This is where we can't go any further and have real answers. So we go from 0 to positive infinity, and all of these values will work. It will give us a real number. If we put in infinity, the square root of infinity will give us a real, obviously that's kind of ridiculous, but you understand what I mean. Anything in a positive direction will work. And let's do one more example where we get a 0 in the denominator. So let's say we have f of x is equal to 1 over 1 minus x squared. So here we have a situation where we can possibly have a 0 in the denominator. If x is equal to a number that will subtract, if x is equal to 1, then we're going to get a 0 in the denominator. So we cannot have x equal 1 or minus 1, because minus 1 squared is also positive 1. Positive 1 minus 1 is 0. But any other number will be fine. If we put in 4, we're going to get, if we put in 4, we'll get 16. 16 minus 1 is negative 15, so negative 1 over 15. We can put any other number in there. We can put in 0, we'll get 1 over 1, which is 1. And all of those will be real numbers. The only numbers that could either make this undefined or a negative square root, which it's not possible in this situation. There's no radical. So the only thing we have to look out for is a 0 in the denominator, in which case we found both numbers that would give us the 0. So we would say that the domain is negative infinity. So all the numbers from -1 to negative infinity are included. We can put any number in there and it will be a real number. But we cannot put in -1, so we have an open bracket. That means we do not include -1. Also, this symbol means union because we have more information. We can have the numbers between -1 and 1. So numbers like -1/2, -1/4, -3/7, 0, 1/2, 7/8, all of those are included as well. But not 1 either. 1 is not included. If we put in 1, a 0 will result in the denominator. The equation will be undefined. And also we can have 1 to positive infinity. And this is the answer we're looking for this one. We can have the numbers between negative infinity and -1, between -1 and 1, and 1 to infinity. So that is the domain of this function. And this is how we find domains. All we really need to look for is what numbers will give us an undefined answer by creating a 0 in a denominator, and what numbers will result in a negative number in a radical. Aside from that, all the other numbers are included.